Tremendous here, and I got another book review here for you. This is number 11 of the Persolus Race. It is called In the Gardens of Eden. It was written by Alex O'Neill. Still science fiction, still published on August 26th of 2021, and it is 49 pages long. I got a lot to say about this one, so let's just get right to it. So at this point, if you don't know how my spoiler-free reviews work, then you're just not paying attention. I can respect that. But bottom line is there will be some minor spoilers, I have no doubt. I apologize in advance. If that bothers you, please pause the video, click the link in the description below, get a copy of the book, read it, and come back, watch the review. Let me know what you think. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, maybe you're somewhere in the middle, but let's have a conversation. I'd love nothing more. So for this one, there's two main characters, this sorta detective Morris and Taylor Cortez, a track welding menial labor individual that is on this newly terraformed planet. I say newly, they've been there for years, but it's a terraformed planet and they're just trying to make it. The author does wax philosophical a little bit, but you know, it's not a big deal or anything like that. It doesn't really add or take away from the story, just getting their viewpoints in there a little bit, which it's their story, it's their voice. I don't have any issue with that, whatever. It doesn't quite delve into real world politics, but it flirts with it, so is what it is. Not a huge big deal. But it's two stories. It's two mini stories in a short story thing, and I hate this. This is nothing against the story itself, but for me personally, I hate this. This is a short story. These stories have to be concise. These stories have to be, information heavy and everything like that, dense. And to combine two stories into one, especially as disjointed as these were, is not a good look. But basically, Morris is a detective, kind of, and is looking into a reason that a planet was destroyed, Solvis 4 or whatever. And Taylor is one of the people that were on the planet at the time. Taylor isn't a hero. He isn't like this super special individual. He does have some superpowers, but that's not by intent. It's by just, well, we'll get to that in the spoiler-filled part. But bottom line is, it's disjointed, it's a little weak, it's kind of all over the place, and in the end, the story's just not very good. We'll get into that though. The cover, been over the cover, I already know how to feel about the cover. Editing for this one wasn't bad at all. Didn't really see anything that jumped out, didn't ruin anything. I have no problem with the editing whatsoever. Story flow was bad, really difficult to read this story, infuriating at times. The story is written like a children's book with swearing. Very, very simple, wrong language in a lot of ways. The way things are described are very childish, very pedantic, annoying. It almost feels condescending in a way. Very difficult to read the story, and the jump between Detective Morris and Taylor is not natural. It doesn't make any sense. These are two separate stories that had no business being in the same short story together. This really only works for longer stories, and yeah, this one was a 49-page short story, so not terrible, a decent amount of pages. It was just really, really difficult to get into the flow of the writing, because honestly, it wasn't written for an adult. It was written for a child, and it was insulting in a lot of ways, very frustrating. An example of that is earthquakes are shakes, very, very hard shake, a bigger shake, and then an even bigger shake happened. Ooh, I'm not exaggerating. It's that kind of language, and it's hard to read as an adult, and that's what this entire compilation is geared towards. It is not a young adult. It is not a coming of age. This is supposed to be science fiction written for an adult audience, and the way this one is written, children would be the only ones that could get into it, and that's because they don't know any better. The overall feel, I think I've already described, is pretty awful indeed. So the pros to this book is that the editing was good. No misspellings, no real issues. There was a lot of poor word choice, but I would call that proofreading, not editing. And yeah, it would need an outside source proofreader. But Overall, the one thing I can say positive about this story was the editing was good. I don't have a problem with how the editing went. There's a lot of cons, though. The plot is terrible, just awful. I'm looking forward to getting into the spoiler-filled review to really explain it. But the reasoning for so the planet is destroyed, and it's destroyed because the Edens, the terraforming machines that every story prior to this one has shown, it only one a planet, maybe two. I vaguely remember there being two on one of the planets. But the explanation on why they malfunctioned and how it happened is so awful. It's so awful. It ranks up there with the Martha thing from Batman vs. Superman. I mean, it is that poorly thought out, that poorly implemented. It's insulting. It's stupid, and it should never have made it into this book. It never should have made it into this compilation. Whoever was putting this together should have seen this for what it was and removed this story from the book, because it undermines everything that's happened in the story so far. It completely takes out any credibility of the Edens, or how they're deployed and how they're developed, and it's just really terrible. It doesn't fit with anything. It doesn't make any sense. Even taking all the other stories out of the equation, the fact that the author did this to the Eden lore is so tragic and stupid that nobody in real life, make believe or otherwise, would do something this stupid. It's not done today. It won't be done in 5,000 years. I'm infuriated by the fact that this was put into the lore of the Edens, because the Edens are the terraforming machines that humanity sends to planets to set them up for human habitation. And what this author did with the Edens in this one is ridiculous. I'm going to leave it at that. The entire story, it's two independent storylines that are put together in a terrible way. One is the detective interviewing two people, which it turns out he doesn't even have the authority to do. Or maybe he does. It's never really told. 1 minute he doesn't, 1 minute he does. It's all over the place. But the other one is Taylor's story of trying to survive the Armageddon on this planet due to the Eden's malfunction. It's stupid. It's just like, this could have been handled in a letter, to the person that was talking to the detective. Having the detective story, and another problem is Taylor's story is told in the first person, while the detective story is told like you're reading a transcript. So not only are you flopping back and forth between two stories, but you're flopping back and forth between two different writing styles, two different descriptive ways. One's a transcript, one's first person view. It's not well done. It does not flow well. It is not the way you do these things. And it makes a bad story even worse. The gotcha moment for Detective Morris was so awful, I got angry. It was ridiculous. It was so stupid that, like I said, this is a children's book written with swear words. It's truly terrible. Anybody who proofread this one before it went out did this author a disservice. Somebody should have challenged this author, because, again, this story, this whole compilation is written for an adult audience, and this book is so juvenile. The plot is so thin. Everything about it is so wrong. It's an insult to anyone who sits down and reads it. Another problem, and this isn't just with this author, a lot of people do this, Taylor gets hurt. I mean, the planet is falling apart. You're going to get hurt. But his injuries are so often forgotten by the author that the things that he's doing is like, how is this possible? This just happened. How is he doing this? That's broken. That doesn't work anymore. No, when his injuries are needed for some sort of suspense or emotional response, then they're there hot and heavy. But when the author needs Taylor to do something, that injury disappears like it never happened. It's not a big deal at all. It's a continuity issue. It's a plot hole issue. It's something that a proofreader should have caught, which makes me believe, for many reasons, this book was not proofread, and it's frustrating. It really is. The attitudes of the characters flip-flop so often, you get whiplash. At one point, Taylor's talking to one of his friends, his only friend, and the friend gives him a pep talk about being on the planet, and then the very next section, his friend is like, "This place is awful, and we need to get out of here." What the? I literally got whiplash. There's a lawsuit incoming. I mean, there's not. I'm kidding. But it's just it happens all the time. One minute the mom is supportive and helpful. The next minute she's like, leave me, blah blah blah. It's just it happened. The character, I hate this guy, but then the next minute, they're saving them, like putting their family at risk to save somebody that assaulted them earlier. It's all over the place. There was no outline to this story. It was just, I'm gonna word vomit onto the script and then submit it, and maybe it'll make it into the book. And lo and behold, it did. It was incredibly difficult for me to finish this story. I don't typically quit on stories. I wanted to stop reading this book about 10 pages in. I would have if I wasn't doing a review on it. It was that bad. With all that said, I unapologetically give this book half a star out of 5. And the only reason that I don't give it 0 stars out of 5 is because that doesn't feel fair. There was some effort put into this. It was just very, very minimal. Very poorly written, very poorly put together. The desire was there, but the implementation, the execution, and everything about this story just does not fit. This story should be removed from this book as soon as possible. I'm sorry to be so harsh. I'm sorry to be so direct. I usually don't try to be this negative, but this story was insulting. Not only insulting to the reader, but every other author that's inside this compilation. They should have read this story. Every author involved in this compilation should have read through everyone else's story. And if they did, and they saw this for what it was and what it did to the already established stories, they should have petitioned to have it removed. And if it wasn't, then whoever overruled that should be held accountable. They should be ashamed of themselves. This story has no place in this book whatsoever, and I'm really disappointed that it's in there. I really am. So here's a spoiler-filled review where I'm really going to tear into it. Again, if you want to go look at this book for yourself, read this story, find out if I'm full of it, if I nailed it, or somewhere in between, please click on the link in the description below. Buy the book. It's not expensive. Read through all the stories, come back, listen to my review, and let me know if I hit the nail on the head, if I completely missed my mark, or somewhere in between. Would love to have a conversation, even about this book. So anyway, I broke this down into 2 sections, Taylor's story and Morris's story, because trust me, it was confusing enough when I was reading the damn thing. I don't need to do that to you. But Taylor Cortez is a railroad track layer. It's the year 3500, and he's hitting nails on the head in order to create a railroad track that leads into the mines of the planet to basically dig up fuel. The book makes a statement that anything on a planet, or all planets, have something that can be used for fuel, and that's about as deep as it gets into that explanation, which is amazing to me, but is what it is. So yes, there's fuel inside all planets, according to this book. Sure, I can buy into that, whatever. At one point, his buddy says that he's working 28-hour days. I don't know if he was being sarcastic. I don't know if he was being serious. But regardless, that seems like a lot. It's never really declined or confirmed. It's just something that stuck out. I thought it was very weird. A 28-hour day would drive anyone insane, alien planet or not. And they're not natives to this planet. They've only been there a few years. So I wish that the author had been more. It's a very small issue compared to everything else wrong with this story, but that particular thing, it just kind of shows the ridiculousness of the story and how unserious and unprofessional the author kind of approached this particular story. Taylor came to this planet 2-3 years ago-ish. You don't really know for sure, with his parents and his sister. His dad is dead, died a couple years ago due to an accident. His sister has cerebral palsy, and his mom doesn't work. And that's interesting to me too, the way his sister has cerebral palsy and yet got approved for space travel and stationing on an alien planet that was just recently terraformed. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into terraforming, I'd have to imagine. Granted, we don't actually do it, but I think it's a reasonable assumption to assume that anybody that was there regardless of how often they've been doing this, because there's no real automation in here. Like I said, Taylor is a railroad track layer. He's still doing, there's a lot of menial, physical labor tasks that are being done here. And so I gotta wonder at the application that was put in for his sister who has cerebral palsy. Something that they can fix with drugs. It's just they don't have the insurance capable of getting those drugs for their sister. So what? Again, I know why the sister was put in there. It's diversity stuff, and I'm all for it. I don't have a problem with that, but it just doesn't make any sense. The author could have fixed this with a sentence. Just recently got her medical regime or her medicine regime sent to us, and she'd only been taking it for a few days, but it'll be great once she's done with the whole regimen and can function with the rest of us, or something like that. Maybe that's ableist or not, but bottom line is there's the cure. It's the year 3500 plus, 3565 or something like that, and sending somebody with that kind of a disability to a planet that's going to require a ton of constant potential 28-hour working days doesn't make any sense to me. Like, at no point did they say that their dad had some sort of critical skill that was desperately needed, so there was an exception made. Again, that's a 2-sentence fix right there, but nobody bothered to put it in there. It's just one of many plot holes in this really, really bad story. Taylor resents his life. He does it quietly, I'll give him that, but he resents his life. He doesn't want to be a railroad track layer. He doesn't like the scumbags that he works with. Because, of course, if you're doing menial labor, if you're doing hard labor type of stuff, everybody you work with is a scumbag. Taylor does definitely believe that they are better than everyone they work with. They're just awesome, and this is just a stepping stone for them. He's, of course, buddies with this guy, Jake, whose dad is in the government. He's a deputy mayor or something like that. But I do like this. I will give credit where it's due. The author says something that I thought was very clever. Jake's dad had a title that was just impressive enough to sound important, but his actual position was not high enough to actually be important. So he did a lot of posturing. I really liked that. I thought that was a very clever way of saying he's middle management. I will give credit where it's due. That was the best line in the entire book. So basically you get, for no reason, again, this is very poorly done. The world starts coming to an end. It is a 49-page story. I don't need Taylor's background. I don't need to know about his day-to-day running around, having fun, blah, blah, blah. It's a small, maybe page and a half of the story. But again, short story, not necessary, especially considering nobody lives. So I don't care. I needed Taylor. I didn't need to connect with Taylor. Again, this could have all been handled with a letter, an email, an emergency recording that he sent out just before the planet exploded. Whatever. This whole thing, the direction that they took, yes, it's their story, it's their voice, they're allowed to do it, approach it however they want. It just seemed unnecessary, especially considering the real story was Morris's. So anyway, Taylor's hanging out with his buddy, and his buddy's like, hey, I can see you're bummed. What's going on, buddy? And Taylor's like, nothing, just life is getting to me. I don't know if I like being on this planet. And I kid you not, Jake gives him a pep talk. Dude, this planet is a fresh start. It's where dreams come true. Anything that you want, you can have. This is awesome. And Taylor's like, yeah, whatever, man. You talk too much, just like people that I work with. And they're like, oh, you. And then I kid you not, like 2-3 paragraphs later, Jake says, I can't stand this planet. This is where dreams come to die, and we've got to get off this planet. I'm leaving. I'm going to go to charter school and make maps of the universe, and that's going to be awesomest. And Taylor's like, dude, you're crazy. And Jake's like, I want you to come with me. Take my hand, my friend, and let us both go and become charterers. And that's the word that the author used, charterers. I don't know if that's a real word or not. It might be. I'm not going to bother to Google it. And Taylor, at first he's like, no. And then he goes home and searches it online and says, okay, I'll go. And he applies and immediately gets in, apparently. Because the next day he tells his mom and his sister, I'm done. I'm leaving this planet with Jake. We're leaving soon. I mean, it's like tomorrow. We're out of here. And wouldn't you know it, that's when the world starts coming to an end. So basically, what you need to understand is that this is a smaller rocky planet that is described in detail in the book on the Morris's side. There are 6 Edens on this planet. And that stuck out to me because, as far as I knew, there had only ever really been 1, maybe 2 Edens on a planet per planet. That's just how it was. They were very efficient. They were able to, over decades, terraform a planet so that eventually humanity could come and inhabit it. This smaller rocky planet has 6 Edens on it for whatever friggin' reason. They're all connected by a neural network. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. But I kid you not, in this book, the author literally says they are all connected so that if one malfunctions, they all malfunction. What the actual F? I mean, why? Why is that something designed into a terraforming skyscraper, literal skyscraper that autopilots itself to an uninhabitable planet to terraform it to make it habitable for humanity? Why are all of them, why are there more than 1 all of a sudden? More than 2, I'll be generous. Why is there any more than 2, especially on a smaller planet like this? And why, in the name of all that is holy and unholy, screw it, let's get the whole plethora in there. Why is that something that would be programmed into them? Why would you have it so that if one malfunctions, all of them malfunction? It is the stupidest thing I've read in all the stories in this book so far. It makes no sense. It's awful. And if anybody proofread this story that had read any of the other stories in this book, they'd have caught that, called it out, and stopped it from seeing the light of day. It gets worse. So these things are quadruple checked. That is something that is in this story. Edens are quadruple checked. 4 times the testing is done on these skyscraper-sized terraforming machines, right? These are the pinnacle of humanity's stuff. The technology is advanced so far, they literally cannot malfunction. That is in the book. That is now lore. That is written literally in stone, okay? The Edens are quadruple checked for quality testing. They go through a whole gamut of things to ensure that they are perfect. All 6 of these Edens, you find out in this book, it's written down, all 6 of these Edens are missing these 6 metal plates that stop wires from melting and basically falling apart due to the intense heat and pressure that is generated by an Eden. 6 metal plates are all that stopped these Edens from catastrophically failing. All 6 of the Edens that were quadruple checked, mind you, were missed. Why? Because 2 people, 2 single points of failure were able to bypass that checks and balance system or whatever, or sign off on it. What? None of that is true. None of that is right. None of that makes any sense. It is the year 3500 and a half. There's no way this is possible that 2 people would have any kind of control over that whatsoever. And at a minimum, let's say it was true. Let's say it's 100% correct. The tests would be there. The tests would have noticed that. Hey, this test that checks to see if the wires melt, yep, it failed. Okay, great. Dolores and Nagini were the ones that approved it regardless of the major malfunction that was reported by the testing. And the reason that the author gives that these 2 people signed the death warrants for 96 million people with these 6 malfunctioning Edens is so they could get promoted in the future, 5+ years down the road. It makes no sense. Their motivation didn't make any sense. The malfunction didn't make any sense. What they did to the Edens didn't make any sense. What this story does is literally destroys the majestic nature that is the Edens. Everything about the Edens has been ruined by this story. Not only are they susceptible to malfunction now, critical, catastrophic malfunctions if 6 metal plates are removed, fail to be installed in these things, and that can be easily signed off on by 1 or 2 people. And that goes undetected even after a major investigation that caused after the deaths of 96 million people on this planet. They got away with it. Not only did they get away with it, but they got promoted like they had intended by sabotaging these things, which makes 0 sense. But yes, now you need 6+ of these things on small planets, probably closer to a dozen for a medium, and let's just go with an even 20 for any planet large. You know, Jupiter would look like a porcupine. But yeah, not only that, but the neural network garbage that is now unretractable lore to these Edens makes it so that if one screws up, they all screw up. Ugh. I am disgusted by what I'm seeing. And another thing that happens, so the planet starts falling apart. Everybody tries to escape. The panic is real. I'll give him that. The author was able to push the panic. The problem is they didn't push it far enough. Taylor and his group are able to push through panicking people like they're nothing. Nobody really resists them. Nobody stabs them. Nobody shoves them over. At one point, Taylor breaks his arm. He climbs up a weather vane to try to find his mom and sister in a sea of panicked people that are trying to push themselves onto an an escape ship that's already taking off. And he spots them. Of course he does, because, you know, needles in a haystack. But he falls off the weather vane and breaks his arm. His mom and sister are able to get to him no problem by the time he wakes up because he passes out. He gets up, his arm is broken, but that doesn't stop him from doing anything necessary to do with that arm. At one point, so there's this guy named Alf, and he's a bully. He's a jerk to him, kind of, in the beginning of the story. At one point, for no reason whatsoever, Taylor just kind of looks at him, and Alf gets mad, charges him, and punches him in the throat, knocking him on his ass. He falls up against this big machine, but then seconds later he's shouting like it's no big deal. Like, I don't know, poke yourself in the throat real quick. No, don't really do that. But if you ever talk to somebody who's ever been hit in the throat, your voice doesn't come back. And this guy was punched by a reasonably large adult male. And yeah, he knocked him on his butt. He fell down. He was dazed. He was hurt, having trouble breathing. He got punched in the throat. But seconds later, he's shouting and yelling orders and trying to save everybody because, you know, he's the quote unquote hero. It's ridiculous. He goes and he runs into Alf at some point because this planet, like I said, it is small. There's 96 million people on there, but he runs into everyone he knows a couple of times as he's running around. And basically, Alf faints as the planet is tearing apart all around him. And yeah, Taylor, who's not a large guy according to the description, kind of lanky, grabs him up one-handed, throws him over his shoulder, and starts running with him. No problem, jumping. Yeah, that broken arm, that hurt throat, nothing. He's totally fine. And yes, I get adrenaline, but if you've ever broken your arm, you're not doing a lot of these stuff, especially an hour afterwards as your body's really cranking down on the swelling and everything like that. It's absolute insane. It's like the author put that information in there just to make it a little bit interesting, but then didn't have it inhibit him from doing anything the entire time. Long story short, Jake has a tracker in Taylor, and he's able to find him in a hover car. You know, he's the only one on the planet with a car right now, apparently. I don't know what the plan was to get off the planet, but in the car. But yeah, instead of evacuating with his dad like he should have, Jake goes after Taylor in the car to try to save him for whatever reason. Absolute garbage. I don't care who you are, you're not that close. You're not going back onto a planet that you would know, given who your father is. There ain't enough lifeboats, pal. But yeah, he goes back in his car, finds Taylor because he's got a tracking system on him, which of course he does. And they get a hold of him, and they come up with this plan to reprogram an Eden to set off a distress signal so that the Eden will launch itself back into space, and they will eventually be rescued. They do acknowledge it's a long shot, but it's absolute nonsense. And but in order to do this, Taylor, who is a railroad track layer, okay, would have to reprogram these big robots in order to make it so that they could interact with the Edens. Of course, Taylor knows how to do that. He's like, I don't know how to do that. Jake says, I don't know how to do that. Do you? Taylor goes, I do. What? What? You know how to program robots and you're tinking away your days as a railroad track layer? I would imagine that programming skills would be pretty in demand in this new futuristic world. But whatever, I guess laying pipe is the way he wanted to go. And yeah, wow. Wow. Needless to say, thank goodness, the author kills everybody, but not before Taylor is able to get in contact with Jake's dad, who's a middle management politician, telling him that it was the Eden's fault that we all died, and then they all die. And his dad does promise Taylor that he'll tell the world about what happened. There's no proof. There's no actual evidence. So Taylor's dad is just going to go off with a panicked person's verbal communication that says, hey, we all died because of the Edens. I mean, if somebody comes up to you and says, you owe me $50, are you just going to be like, oh, well, they said it. It must be true. I mean, what if I got a politician to tell you owe me $50? Are you still going to buy it? Are you still going to believe it? Are you still going to be able to do anything with that? No, you're not. It's absolute garbage. The best part of this whole thing is that at least the author killed everybody off on the planet. Nobody survived. So the second part of this story is this guy Morris. He's a detective that works for the ISA, which is like the big government of the universe right now. But he's investigating what happened on the planet to punish the ISA or a couple of their workers. I'm very confused. I don't know if he's internal affairs. I don't know if he's a police detective. But what you find out is that he doesn't really have any authority. He's actually kind of a second-class citizen by his own words because he's a cyborg. I guess he had an accident. They put metal parts into him to help him survive. But because of that, he became a second-class citizen. But at the same time, he's got the authority to investigate things. It's all over the place. This whole character is a train wreck of dumpster fires. But it's super weird. It's very odd. It makes no sense whatsoever. And here's the thing. He's questioning two people that are higher-ups in the Eden hierarchy, right? The ISA hierarchy. And that he believes is responsible for the destruction of the planet 7 years prior. But he's doing so with no authority. Like, they even acknowledge that. How long do you think you can hold us here? You don't have any authority to talk to us. Why would they even be in the room? These are people that have already been through a massive investigation over this. That is acknowledged in the story. Granted, they found nothing and determined that it was the planet's fault. It was an undetectable core error is what the official story was. But this detective dredges up literally nothing. But he has these two people's names somehow, and he believes that they're guilty, and he's able to get them into a room to question them, even though he has no authority to do so. That would literally be like me coming to you, putting you in a room, and starting to question you about something that happened almost a decade ago. I have no authority to do that whatsoever. I have no metal in me either, so I'm not even a second-class citizen, and you don't have to do that. That's literal kidnapping. I mean, granted, it's the year 3500 and a half, but still, the author pretty much says that the rule structure and the legal structure is very similar to what we know now. And that's acknowledged. He has no authority to do this at all. It makes no sense. These people that he's interviewing would know this. They've already been through an intense investigation. 96 million people died. This is not their first time in an interrogation room, and they got away with it. They would have lawyers. They would have the knowledge. They never, ever, ever would have sat down with this literal nobody to be interviewed about something, especially with them knowing that they were guilty. Of course they were, but it's absolutely a ridiculous farce on its face that this entire scenario, this section of the story would even happen. These aren't children. These aren't ignorant people. These are heavily educated, unscrupulous, dangerous mass murderers, okay? And they just, yeah, okay, some random detective wants to talk to me, somebody who claims to be a detective, but clearly either they've already discovered that he doesn't have the authority to talk to him, or they're not even sure who he is exactly when they first talk to him. There's no chance in hell this would have happened. None. These people would have laughed and said, you can talk to my lawyer. There's no way they would have done this. But they do eventually, after they discover he's a cyborg, ask for a lawyer instead of just leaving. And the lawyer that comes in is hilarious. He's a fat idiot, literally drinking a bubblegum milkshake during this interrogation, questioning, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's a farce. The whole thing, this was written by somebody that has never talked to a lawyer in their life. Good on them. I kind of respect that. I wish I could say the same. But at the same time, if you don't know what you're talking about, Google is your friend. Please, please, next time, Google an actual interaction. I know it's not the year 3500 and a half. I know it's only 2022, but do yourself a favor, because this comes off like a child's lie. And that's what I said before. This story is written, it's a children's book written with swear words. It's awful. None of it makes any sense. None of it is geared towards an adult audience, and it's shameful. The gotcha moment is literally the most ridiculous gotcha moment I've seen since the Martha thing from Batman vs. Superman. The detective tells these women, the two people that he's questioning, with the lawyer right there, we have the same shrink, and they owed me a favor, so they showed me your files. Nobody is going to believe that except for maybe a very stupid child. Their lawyer is right there and didn't immediately look at his clients and say, that's a lie. None of that is true whatsoever. And even if it was, don't say a word, because anything that he has was illegally obtained. So it doesn't matter if it's a literal video of you committing the crime he's claiming you committed. It is inadmissible because of the way he got it. In fact, we've got a case against him and your shrink. You are going to be owning that shrink's office by the time this is over. Thank you, Mr. Detective, for being awful at your job and being a moron. We will be filing against this. And they'd have walked out. I'm not a lawyer and I know this. There's no way. But of course, this bluff works, and both the people freak out and say, how could you possibly know that? Oh my gosh, yes, I did it all. And he goes, ha ha, I was kidding. Of course they didn't let me see the files. I just knew we had the same shrink. Ha ha. I mean, what? So, yeah, needless to say, he literally says, I believe on Earth the phrase is, gotcha, sunshine. I wanted to punch this book in the face, okay? That's how ridiculous awful this is. This is a child story, first draft, that never should have seen the light of day. It is disgusting, it is awful, and if you can't tell, I am infuriated by the fact that it's included in this story. It has deconstructed all the positive work that has been done by every story before it, and I cannot encourage enough for the individual that compiled all these stories into this book to go back and remove this entire thing from the storyline, because it kills not only the Edens, it kills the world, it kills the legal team, it destroys everything. Because you got to ask yourself, these 6 Edens with the malfunction and everything else landed on this planet decades ago to terraform the damn planet. Why did they not malfunction until almost 3 to 5 years after humanity got there? What caused it all of a sudden? So much trash, so awful. This is a bad story. This is the textbook version of a terrible story. It has no business in this compilation, and I'm insulted that it's inside of it. So it should come as no surprise that my half-a-star rating is going to stay in there. That is as low as I'll go. I mean, I couldn't imagine finding a story that I would give a 0 to. This one did have a couple of cool lines. I did enjoy that. Honestly, a bubblegum milkshake sounds really good, but I'm not a fat, useless lawyer either, so, I'm just fat. But it's just, I will give it half a star, but yes, I hated this story. I loathe this story. But is it worth a 0 out of 5? No, I don't believe that would be fair. The spiteful side of me wants to make it a 0, but no, it wouldn't be fair. I try to make it off integrity, or base my reviews off integrity anyway, but I think a 0.5 out of 5 stars definitely gets my point across. And again, though, you don't have to take my word for it. I am one person. It's just my opinion of the story. Please click the link, get the book, read the stories, and come back and tell me what you think. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I somewhere in between? Feel free to use swear words. Just try to write it at least at a 3rd grade level. And that's it. Another book review is in the history books. As always, though, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, feel free to put them in the comment section below, and I will get back to you as quick as I can. And also, as always, thanks.